4-0 homestand for the Bucks, and this was probably a game.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Spot on.
Look, these games, I was just talking about it with somebody else during the post game. These games, I know fans may not want to hear it. These games are tough to get up for. When you see the injury report and you see out.
You can tell by the crowd tonight, too.
Well, I mean, these guys are competitors at the highest level.
Yep.
And when that's taken away, there's still NBA players that you're going up against. And it's especially dangerous, I think, against teams like Philly because of the makeup of the roster. Like, all the conversations we've had about Ryan Rollins and what the Bucks are going to have to do there to get him on a standard contract. They're starting to have the similar conversations about Justin Edwards in Philadelphia. Dembona is a young rookie. They're very high on that. They can see some things in. And, guys like Ricky Compton as well, that you have young guys who were afterthoughts at best coming into the season because of the offseason that the 76ers have. But now the way the season has gone, there are many questions to be answered about the future of said players, this team, the direction that they go in. And these games are their opportunities to say, look, don't forget about me. Like here, I established I can do this a handful of times or consecutive games. That's what you start to see. And that's the danger of an opponent like this. But again, especially seeing no Joel Embiid, no Paul George. I mean, even further, no Gershon Yabusele, who has been arguably their MVP so far this season. Andre Drummond returned last night. He's back out again. Caleb Martin, one of the other offseason signings, he's out. So these are tough games to get up for, but the Bucks answer the challenge. And Philly, it wasn't a wire-to-wire win. It wasn't a game you led as much in terms of minutes as they did against the Orlando Magic. But especially in the second half, they did a really good job of even when you would hit those moments where the offense wasn't crisp. It wasn't great for most of the night. That's the other thing of, hey, kind of similar to Doc's message Friday night. If there's a lot that I didn't really like, but it's hard to complain when we won and won by the margin that we did. There was a lot of those moments to not like offensively and say, man, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And they're falling into this trap. But yet you still scored 123 points against a team that's played pretty well defensively. So it seemed like, I know the numbers are not that, but it did seem like the Bucks were up by 9 basically the duration of this game.
Yeah, you said it best, Justin. I couldn't agree with you more. A win is a win. Tonight marking their 5th straight home win, their 4th straight this week alone. And look, at the bottom line for me, Justin, is they beat a team that they were supposed to beat. And like you said, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but at the end of the day, they got the job done. 7 games over 500. That's a season best for them so far. And it's a long season. And tonight, I didn't have any worry about this one. I know Philly had a little bit of a run in the third quarter, went up a little bit. I think their largest lead was 6 or 7 points throughout the course of this game, but never really had any fear that this one was going to be a loss. Obviously, the 76ers, to their credit, didn't have half their team. And I thought tonight they played pretty well. The Bucks didn't shoot well, especially from 3, but when you don't have Embiid and Paul George, and you expect to get the win, and the Bucks handled business on a night where they just didn't shoot the ball from 3 for most of the game. However, the game ball tonight going to somebody who did shoot the ball great in the fourth quarter, and that's Damian Lillard. Justin scored his 22,000th point of his career as well. So that was kind of cool for him to get the ovation at the end of the game. The big thing for me with Dame tonight, again, I said it, going into it, was the fourth quarter. The Bucks, a very sluggish third quarter, kind of looked like they were half asleep, kind of like you said at the beginning. It's a little hard to get up for. The crowd was kind of in and out of it, and for the most part, the Bucks were in control for a big chunk of this game. But it was a sluggish third quarter. They began that fourth quarter up 9, and within minutes, Justin, with Damian Lillard, the game was over. He scored 16 of his 25 points, including 3 three-pointers in that final quarter. He was aggressive. He was shot hunting. Everything that he had talked about it after the game. I played the audio on Bucks Shoot Around before the game. Vin Baker told him to go do you, be you, and play your game, and that's exactly what he did in that fourth quarter. It kind of helped put this Bucks game away and a good win. Mentioned it, 7 games over 500. The first time that's happened this season. 4-0, mentioned that as well in this homestand this week. And he handled business. There was no doubt about it. A win is a win, and at the end of the day, I will take a win over a loss, especially against a team they were supposed to beat.
Yeah, a strong win tonight for the Bucks. I know it's not a strong team in the standings. I mean, it was rough interacting with members of the Sixers traveling party today. As you gave each other the look, and you're like, we experienced some of this last year, not quite to the levels that you guys are dealing with. And this is a rough one for this team, for the expectations coming into the season, how everything has played out in the larger conversations that exist for Philly now, that suddenly finds himself 11 games below 500. These two teams in a near identical spot. Look, injuries have just been more significant for the 76ers than they have for the Bucks, but the other big part of it is I think we all kind of caution this to not just the Sixers. Other teams have made large, sweeping, wholesale changes. It takes time. It takes time to develop those tendencies and that chemistry and get to know where your teammates are going to be and everything else. It's not just as easy as a flip-the-switch thing, especially for Philly, that I think there was only 3 holdovers a season ago. So as much as it was rough at similar notes for the Bucks a year ago, it has been even more challenging for this 76ers team so far this season. But I'm not sure Bucks fans particularly care
or have any sympathy. No, we're good.
123 for the Bucks to 109 for the 76ers. So 4 straight wins now, and you close out the month of January with 5 of your final 6 games on the road. So just as the start of this month, it didn't happen with the first 2 games. We talked about the flipping to the calendar year of 2025 and the disappointment that started, but the Bucks really rebounded from there and have done a strong job. The month's not over, but a strong job of making the most out of a very home-heavy first 2/3 of the month of January. And now that comes to an end. And we talked about the challenges that this team is going to face here. 3 back-to-backs in the next 2 weeks. They will have 4 back-to-backs between now and the All-Star break. Some of those are very tough opponents. One specifically at home against the Grizzlies, in Oklahoma City against the Thunder. So it starts to pick up, and especially once you get into February, the schedule is going to pick up a whole lot more for the Bucks. So we'll take a look at what's in front of the team. Another game against a sub-500 team, and it may be a little bit deceiving, but just how important is a win on Wednesday night against a struggling New Orleans Pelicans team? We'll get into that conversation coming up after 4-0 homestand for the Bucks, taking down the shorthanded 76ers tonight with this win. 59 combined points from Giannis and Damian Lillard here. Damian Lillard, 16 points in the fourth quarter. It's a regular season game. But what he did, that's what you brought him here for. And that's what's going to determine, I think, how far the Bucks go this season, is that scoring in those moments. Damian Lillard, it doesn't even have to be the scoring, just the threat, and what he has continued to set up here for this team. I do want to get to the next game and the road games, I should say, coming up. The road trip after Thursday for the Bucks here. But I'd be remiss not to point out, I thought tonight was the best game we've seen all season from one player on this team. Do you have a guess who that is?
I think I know, because he was going to get my game ball tonight. I thought about it. I'm guessing you're thinking of Andre Jackson Jr. Because I
thought it was a complete game.
Completely agree with you.
He had 2 early fouls. I think he finished the game with 2 fouls.
That's correct.
He made the most of his usage offensively, figuring out how to really navigate around the dunker spot and get his teammates involved and find open shots and make open shots and be aggressive around the rim. I thought it was a very strong game from Andre Jackson Jr.
That's exactly what you want to see, too. I mean, he took those 2 early threes. He was 1 for 2 from 3. I thought both looks, too, Justin, were ones that he should have taken. Obviously, he made the second one. But, you know, I was saying it, too, up in the press box, talking to a couple other people. Like, for him...
What people?
Very VIP people. Very important people. But for him, it's just, you know, kind of fit in where you get in that with that starting lineup. You know, be in that dunker spot. I know you don't want to crowd the paint, obviously, with Giannis, but there's moments where he could kind of fit in that paint and kind of be in that dunker spot and second chance opportunities, and there's got to be some threat of an offensive output from him for opposing defenses, and tonight was a perfect example of what that was. 9 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal. I mean, he filled the stat sheet tonight, and he was really, really efficient. I had him on my notepad here for the game ball. The second, I was ready to give it to him, Justin, but Damian Lillard exploded in the fourth quarter, and I was like, man. And, I mean, Giannis had 34 and 15, so you couldn't overlook that either. But I agree with you. I thought from the eye test with Andre Jackson Jr. tonight, the behind-the-back pass to Giannis, which I know he's been scolded at times for getting a little flashy on those passes, but tonight, man, he was fun to watch. And that is, for me, that is exactly what you need from Andre Jackson Jr. Now, are you going to get that efficiency, you know, the 4 or 5 every game from him offensively? You might not even get 5 shots, you know, from him in a game. But tonight, it was perfect from him. It was really encouraging to see. And, you know, he missed the last game with that hip contusion. So, you know, it was good to see him kind of get right back out into the starting lineup, get right back into the flow of things, and be aggressive and be an impact player. And that's exactly what he was tonight.
855-616-1620 is the Siding Unlimited talk and text line to join us tonight on Bucks Talk. They've done a really good job of beating the teams you are supposed to beat of late. We mentioned the start to the month of January, not so much. That's what kind of started to cause a little bit of concern when you had that Nets result, the Trailblazers loss as well. You even look back to what the Bucks did Sunday against the Knicks, when you felt like, okay, after a bit of a rough start to open up the month of January, you started to play better, right the ship, and you felt like you're in a good spot. It was a much different team than it was the first time you played the Knicks, I believe November 8th. That was the 10th game of the season. And all these reasons for optimism to think, okay, this is the litmus test for the Bucks to kind of show it's not just this team beating up on bad teams. And granted, they've beaten good teams along the way, too. You look at the Magic twice, although that's starting to become more of a conversation with the throws that the Magic have been in of late.
Another loss tonight from them.
The Thunder in a game that doesn't count, but we all remember what happened. The Houston Rockets. So they've had these performances, and you felt like that was your chance to show something, and you let it slip by. But they grabbed the rope once again on this homestand. You beat the Kings, who were the hottest team in the league at the time of that game. Night 2 of a back-to-back. You beat said Magic, who had been struggling of late now, but still a tough physical team that even without the firepower offensively they are missing, they have continued to make it difficult for their opponents. Friday night, we talked about tonight being the case too. Friday night had the chance to be one of those trap games. And again, you lost to the Nets and Raptors on the home floor to start the month. You didn't do that against the Raptors. And tonight, it wasn't a dominant effort that we saw for most of this homestand, but you didn't fall victim to that trap tonight either against a very undermanned Philly team that we addressed. It's tough to get up for those types of games, and the Bucks never let those wild swings take place where you look up all of a sudden you think, man, how are the Bucks losing by 10 points right now? Like, they avoided that, but these last 6 games are really important games because of how challenging things start to get once you get into the month of February, as we've addressed. But also, the end of the month is where it starts to pick up. So I mentioned you got New Orleans next. You do get 2 days off. I want to touch on that game more specifically in a second. But back-to-back, Wednesday night New Orleans, Thursday night back here against the Miami Heat, who won tonight, do have Jimmy Butler back, so in that sense they're full strength. They continue to hover around there in the standings, not too far back of the Bucks. Then you start a West Coast, or a Western Conference at least, road trip. Saturday night in Inglewood, your first chance to get to see the Intuit Dome with the Clippers, who have been playing very well so far this season and just got Kawhi Leonard back recently. Norman Powell has been playing terrific for them. Their defense has been very good. They continue to hover around in the mix in the Western Conference, in the 5 spot right now, not far behind the Denver Nuggets, who are 4th. Then you have a chance at, I don't want to say redemption, but to get those wins back. The Utah Jazz, a team that you dominated earlier this year, they're playing for their first round pick this year. And they're in the race for Cooper Flagg. That's a game it feels like, I know the Bucks historically have had some issues in Utah. A back-to-back is attached to it. But that game and the Blazers game in Portland, those are 2 games you feel like you got to win because of the schedule that waits for you once you get into February. And then you wrap up the month in San Antonio against the Spurs, a Spurs team that you took it to here, and they have started to see a little bit of a slide in their play of late as well. So to me, when I look at the schedule that remains for the Bucks in this month of January, I add the caveat: you don't want to overlook teams and get too far ahead of yourself. But look, even with Zion Williamson back and the Pelicans getting a few other pieces back, they've had a lot of injuries to deal with this season. Having said that, they have the 4th worst record in the league and the 2nd worst record in the Western Conference. The Bucks are leaving for New Orleans tomorrow. They have to change their travel plans because of a snowstorm that is hitting New Orleans. So they're going to be spending, 2.5, 3 days in New Orleans. And the 2 days before the game, getting ready and preparing for the game there on the road. That's going to be something to monitor and keep an eye on in terms of how the game starts. But an 11-32 team, they're getting pieces back, have gotten some pieces back, but that is still a game it feels like is a must-win for the Bucks because of February onward, what waits for you.
I couldn't agree more. Now, I will put an asterisk next to that. Pelicans record 4-1 in their last 5. Is that? I mean, they beat the Jazz. You mentioned what the Jazz are playing for. They'll play the Jazz tomorrow. They beat the Mavericks. Again, the Mavericks are kind of on a little bit of a skid. The Bulls not kind of in the same boat as the Mavericks. Celtics, they only lost to Boston by 1, and that was on the road in Boston, a 120-119, and then they beat the same team that the Bucks just beat tonight. But I would agree with you, and I think that this is kind of where we're at with this Bucks team. I think this is where my expectations are starting to trend, Justin, for this Bucks team. Now, over these last 5 games for the Bucks, they've won their home games, the last 5 home games, by an average score of 19 points. I mean, that's business-like, mentality right there, going out and beating teams that you should be beating, and that is the expectation when you have Giannis and you have Dame and you have a healthy Chris Middleton. And so, are they going to win every game that they're supposed to? Of course not. But this is an opportunity to where they had a busy week, 4 games this week, 2 games back to back in the middle of all that. But now you have an opportunity to get some rest. You're about as healthy can get for them this year. Obviously, the AJ Green situation is something to monitor. But as much as I love AJ Green, he's not a cornerstone of this team. And I think that they can survive that. However long that takes. I just expect them to win games that they should win, that they should beat teams that they should beat, and the New Orleans Pelicans are one of them, which you'll see on Wednesday. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think it is a must-win game because that schedule gets really rough. That they're going to start winning the games that they should win. Doc Rivers had talked about, we probably don't win these earlier in the year, but that mentality is kind of flipped. And you and I had talked about it on Friday. Guys just know their roles now. It's a little bit different now. It's a little bit, you have a different feeling. You know, you and Dave talked to Gary Trent Jr. after the game on Friday about, why this team's rolling. And he's like, man, we got guys on the bench who could be starting in the NBA with a handful of other teams. And he's absolutely right. Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, himself. The expectation now is the Bucks bench is better than most teams. Their starting five is better than most teams. For me, Justin, as a Bucks fan, my expectations is when you're better than that team you're going in, you should win that game.
855-616-1620, the Signing Unlimited talk and text line to join us tonight on Bucks Talk. A couple other notes on the New Orleans Pelicans that we'll get to in a moment here. Also, the latest on the injury report for the Bucks as they were out. One of those names that you mentioned, a few names for tonight's contest. We'll get to that conversation coming up after. Both went to Giannis, one in transition, one where he did a good job of just drawing the attention of the defense as he was attacking from that dunker spot and just dropped it off to an open Giannis for the dunk. So a very good game, all things told here, from Andre Jackson Jr. on both ends of the floor. I mean, you look at this box score tonight and see Tyrese Maxey with a big game. He has traditionally had those against the Bucks. He's done it against a lot of teams.
Question for you. I know you're on the call, but did it feel like he had that big of a game? Because
Yes.
it did. Okay. Because the consensus up there in the VIP booth was that it just didn't feel like it. Now, maybe because there was just not a whole lot of juice to this game, but it didn't feel like. What did he finish with? 37. It just didn't. And he's great. I mean, he's one of my favorite non-Buck players to watch, but it didn't feel like it was a 37 type night for him. I mean, shout out to him. It just didn't feel like that big of a night for him offensively.
So I mentioned it, but on the call, the Bucks have had some difficulty this season when the defense blitzes Damian Lillard. So when whoever it is, and once that screen is set, when the defense just says, we're just keeping both guys out here. Like we're not even going to switch off or try to hedge this screen at all. We're just keeping both guys out here on Damian Lillard. The Bucks have run into some difficulties offensively. They have not been terribly efficient. Their offensive rating has been below 100 in those moments when that happens. That's not just on Damian Lillard. It's not saying, well, Damian Lillard has struggled to do this. It's on the entire team. It's on your spacing. It's on the sets that you're running. It's on who's one pass away. How do you really combat that? I think they started to get better at it tonight. They did a really good job against the Sacramento Kings, and you could make the case, well, a lot of the Kings' defensive numbers were more fool's gold, and it's easier to have those showings against that Kings team. But nonetheless, it was something you needed to see from this group because you have to assume you're going to see a lot of that in the second half of the season and especially in the playoffs, especially if Damian Lillard is doing this and getting downhill, attacking the rim, spraying the ball out to open shooters. That's one area that teams are going to look at and say, well, look, we got the game film that shows it. We got the numbers that back it up to when we do this. They got better at it as the game went on tonight, but more importantly, they started doing that to Tyrese Maxey tonight when it may have taken too long, but when they realized, look, Council, Ubre, Gordon, Edwards, this is the only guy we're really afraid of. So let's just get the ball out of his hands. If somebody else shoots,
Do you think the blitzing Damian Lillard has anything to do with who? I mean, obviously it has to do with who's on the court, right? Because if you have Andre Jackson Jr. out there, you can afford as a defense to blitz him and not feel back. Correct? So does that in your opinion, does that factor into that?
Wait, say again?
So if they're blitzing Damian Lillard, right? And does it matter who's on the court? Because if it's a Andre Jackson Jr., were they blitzing him more with Andre Jackson Jr. on the court, or was that something?
I don't.
Because
think
that would be
it's really mattered, but I would have to check. But the big thing is who's one pass away. So it matters.
Yeah.
Your spacing and who's going to what spot, because that's how you beat it. One pass away.
And
The help is one pass away where you have your guys. And the way that we've seen this team shoot the ball too, if Damian Lillard is going to consistently be double teamed, that means somebody is open. So whether it's one pass away or two passes away and you force the defense to rotate, the chances are there's a pretty good shooter that's going to be left open. So you got to figure out ways to work on that spacing, to work on how do we attack those traps. What does Dame need to do differently? What do his teammates need to do differently in calling for the ball or coming to him? But we should have a big advantage here, and we just haven't seen it so far this year.
Brook Lopez, too, correct me if I'm wrong, he had two of his three-pointers with those blitzes. Because he was wide open on the last two that he hit.
Yeah, I know one was.
I thought the other one was like the following possession or maybe a possession after that.
Yeah,
but you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that is going to be, I think that's the next evolution of this offense. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'd like to do the math maybe during the break on where this offense has been, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But another game where they scored over 120 points in one. I mean, that to me, that's the big thing with this team. They're
but it's
really good.
You can't so much look at the raw numbers because it's not the points that you're scoring; it's the possessions that you have. And
Feeling
I'm
this one
feeling
probably didn't move the needle that much for their offensive rating,
because it was. There are moments where it was a slog, and I mean, this was a game where you did get up to 123, but if you really executed, this felt like this was there for the taking to be your highest scoring game of the season, well past 130. So I am curious to see what it's going to sit at for their metrics from this game and what that means for the rest of the year. But the encouraging part is not only the 4 wins on this homestand and beating teams that you felt like coming in, you really need to win this game. And you did. And those are spots we've seen the Bucks struggle at times, not consistently, but at times this season and last season. And now it's going to shift towards the opposite, where the next game on the schedule, maybe it's a bit deceiving.
Need to win this game. Maybe there's a little more pushback. So we'll take a closer look at that matchup with the New Orleans Pelicans. Wednesday nights, the Bucks' first of 5 games, 5 of their final 6 in the month of January, on the road to close things out. The 4th worst record in the league, the New Orleans Pelicans. Is it a must-win? We'll take a closer look at the Pelicans matchup after this on Bucks Talk.
The Hardwood Homilies continue after this. This is Bucks Talk.
A cancer diagnosis shouldn't have to mean living without joy or optimism. At the Freighter and the Medical College of Wisconsin Cancer Network, we're pushing to put cancer in its place. By bringing together teams of leading specialists who are pioneering ways to treat every type of cancer, and by unleashing promising new clinical trials. Let's push ahead until every cancer diagnosis is a story of survivorship. To learn more about breakthrough cancer care, visit freighter.com/cancer.
AccuNet Mortgage is an equal housing lender. NMLS ID 255368.
Elizabeth and John bought their starter home 8 years ago, BC, as in before children. Now, with 2 elementary school-age kids, they wanted to make a move to the suburbs for a bigger home with more yard. But they didn't know if or how they could buy their next home without selling their current one. Fortunately, a friend who was a multi-time AccuNet client connected them with us, and we soon determined they could, in fact, afford to buy without selling first, which was a big relief to them and their real estate agent. Armed with an AccuNet rock-solid guaranteed pre-approval, it still took several weeks to find the right home for the next chapter in their life, but I'm happy to report that Elizabeth, John, and their boys opened their presents on Christmas morning in their new home after closing just a few days before. Whether you're buying your first home or your next home, go with the pros who have all the tools and know-how to make your home buying experience as smooth and successful as humanly possible. Get started with your rock-solid guaranteed pre-approval by clicking on the blue button at AccuNet.com. That's ACCUNET.com.
I haven't had anything to eat for days, and being hungry hurts.
Going without oil changes can destroy your engine, but it doesn't compare to the effect of going without food. That's why the Automobile Dealers Association of Metro Milwaukee is determined to make sure no one goes to bed hungry. Through March 1st, they'll donate $1 from every oil change to Feeding America Eastern Wisconsin. Every dollar provides 3 healthy meals. Over the past 14 years, Adam has donated over $890,000, providing more than 2.6 million meals to people across southeast Wisconsin, the majority being children and seniors. And with today's ongoing challenges, the need is greater than ever. So help the hungry while helping your vehicle. Get your oil changed by Adam Dealer Factory Train Techs at a price as low or lower than independent shops. Visit an Adam member dealer near you.
For a list of participating dealers, visit ADAMM.com.
This is Bucks Talk.
Bucks go the other way with it. Chris at the top of the arc. Works it over to Lillard. Lillard squeezes off a 3, and he sticks another. Damian Lillard trying to find that rhythm again. He's made his last 2.
4 straight wins for the Bucks, taking down the Philadelphia 76ers tonight at Fiserv Forum. 123-109, the final score. Big game from Giannis with 34 points. Damian Lillard with 25, and 16 of those coming in the fourth quarter for the Bucks. So now they go to New Orleans to take on the Pelicans Wednesday night. And look, by the numbers, as mentioned, Pelicans have the 4th worst record in the league. 2nd worst in the Western Conference, 4th worst overall. They did recently get Zion Williamson back in the mix here They've started to get some guys. They had a lot of injuries earlier in the season, and they've started to get some guys back. They've won 6 of their last 9 games. So that's really one of the more remarkable parts is for a team that's 11-32, they were 5-29 before that stretch. But those wins were against a Mavericks team that I believe was still without Kyrie Irving, and they're playing without Luka Doncic, against the Utah Jazz, who we mentioned the Bucks will see next week on their schedule, and it's a Jazz team that is playing for the best draft pick possible, I think is fair to say. They beat the Bulls, who have also been experiencing some struggles of late. You mentioned they lost to the Celtics by 1, but they also lost to the Blazers, lost to the Timberwolves, beat these 76ers in a similar game that was close, and went down to the wire, and then 2 wins against the Wizards. So, look, we can't praise the Bucks for beating teams you're supposed to beat and then penalize the Pelicans, but upon further review of this schedule, that's what's really boosted this 6-3 run by the Pelicans of late. But still, if this is a group that has most of their pieces intact, and they play tomorrow, do the Pelicans hosting the Utah Jazz once again, if they have their guys, the challenge is obviously Zion Williamson and how you contain him. C.J. McCollum has been playing pretty well as well. DeJounte Murray still hasn't been the guy in Atlanta or New Orleans that either team envisioned getting there. But that's about it. They're still playing without Brandon Ingram. Trey Murphy's been playing on the team. He's been playing pretty well. But, we talked about this 76ers team, especially with the injuries. There's no length. There's no rim protection, especially a team that has Giannis. It's not much different with the New Orleans Pelicans. They have Daniel Tice. That's about it in terms of their big. Zion Williamson is not on the floor for his defense. So this could be one of those opportunities for the Bucks on Wednesday.
Question for you real quick, because you and I had talked about Friday possibly being...
And by the way, they have the fifth worst offense in the league and the 5th worst defense.
Again, all recipe for a successful Bucks quick road trip down there to New Orleans. Question for you, though. Do you think out of all of these games that we have looked at, you and I had talked about maybe Toronto because you had Philly coming into town, maybe Orlando, overlooking on that second leg of a back-to-back. To me, this spells out trap game more than anything. It's a 1 game. I know they have 5 to follow after the Miami Heat game. And I'm not saying that, the Bucks team's thinking like this, but for me, it's easy to overlook this one because of those numbers you just gave me, Justin. It's a 1, they're going there a little bit early. So hopefully that changes things, but maybe it won't. But you come right back home that same night to host the Miami Heat, which, if you ask the NBA, is the rival of the Milwaukee Bucks and the team that is fully healthy and trying to turn their season around a little bit and get back onto, into the championship aspiration field. But to me, this feels like more of a trap game than any of the other games they've had this week. Am I off base there? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I still think the Raptors game was much more of a trap game. I mean, it's typically the ones that give you not like exclusive to the Bucks for any team in the league.
Sure.
The games that coaches will always say, "Hey, keep an eye on this," are the last or one of the last games on a decent-sized homestand, and your first, the other way around, the first or so of a homestand, and your last game's coming off the road, where it's just basically we're almost there.
Yeah,
we can see
just get over
our own home in our bed. Let's just get this over with. So in that sense, especially if you win in New Orleans, it's going to make it interesting for that Miami Heat game, being night 2 of a back-to-back. I don't really know what to make of this one with the Pelicans because of the Bucks' schedule and travel plans being adjusted as of this afternoon, where the winter storm that's taking place in those parts, I think New Orleans is expecting 3 to 6 inches of snow. The Bucks were supposed to leave Tuesday afternoon.
And they're not prepared for 3 to 6 inches of snow down there.
Yeah, instead they're leaving tomorrow to get into New Orleans. So all the prep work that they do for that Pelicans game is going to be from New Orleans and doing it from there. So that, I don't know how much of that is a trap game, but that's the interesting thing to keep an eye on with that one and how much the travel plans have impacted things or would impact things for the Bucks. The Pelicans, as we just mentioned, bottom 5 in offense, bottom 5 in defense. They're not terribly efficient. They have the worst effective field goal percentage in the league. They're in the middle of the pack in turnover rate offensively. So, not the worst, not the best in terms of protecting the basketball. They do not get to the free throw line a lot. And defensively, they allow the second best effective field goal percentage, and they're second worst in offensive rebounding rates in the league. So they're the defensive rebounding opportunities that exist for opponents. Same story for the Philadelphia 76ers. That was one of their weaknesses. I think we saw the Bucks take advantage of that in this game tonight. So by the numbers, and I know that's a dangerous game to play, but by the numbers, there should be a decent amount of opportunities for the Bucks. Look, they're an 11-win team, and we just said 5th worst offense, 5th worst defense. There should be a lot of opportunities, but specifically in areas that the Bucks already have a lot of strengths, where they perform at their best. Those really line up with the areas that the Pelicans do not excel in. So I hesitate to call anything a must-win because it's 82 games we're talking about. It's not the end of the season. I mean, these games are all important. And as we mentioned before, when you drop these games to sub-500 teams, look back to that loss to the Nets on, January 2nd, the loss a couple of days later to the Portland Trail Blazers. You've got to make that up somewhere. So you got to beat one of those teams that maybe you didn't expect to beat, one of the better teams in the league. But what makes me move closer and closer to saying, okay, I could sign off on this being a must-win, is the sheer fact that you don't have many of these games left. An 11-32 team in the New Orleans Pelicans, you don't have many games left against those teams that are in the bottom 10 in the standings.
Yeah, and you mentioned it before. That was the frustrating part to start the year, and that was the refreshing part of this week. Was that outside of, I know we're both not sold on Sacramento as being a deep playoff team, but they were the hottest team coming into that game, and Orlando, who's also, I know they've on a little bit of a skid and they've dealt with a hand ton of injuries, but they're still a team that is a tough team to play, and those are 2 big wins in my opinion. The last 2 were obviously wins that I think that the Bucks would tell you they needed to win and should have won, and they did win. But this is another one of those. I'm just worried. When I look at this Pelicans roster, Justin, I know they're dealing with injuries. I know Herb Jones has got the torn labrum, but does this feel like an 11-32 team? Yes. Looking at this roster, I know it feels. I know, based on the numbers you gave me, but Brandon Ingram, C.J. McCollum, Trey Murphy, DeJounte Murray, Murray, that's a talented roster, though. I don't. Yeah, the records. You are kind of what your record is, and you are 5th worst offense and defense. But I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be a just show up and win type game for the Bucks. Is it a game that they should win, that they're going to be favored to win? And yes, but it also presents some problems, for the Bucks defense.
They allow far and away the most shots at the rim in the league this season, which is an area the Bucks should dominate.
Well, without Herb Jones, that's going to happen.
And location dependent. So in other words, you look at the shot chart for a team and say, based on the spots you're giving up a lot of field goal attempts, if everybody shot league average from all of those spots, here's where you would rank. They're still dead last. In other words, you're giving up a lot of shots from spots that you shouldn't be giving them up from, and you're not contesting them. Like, guys, teams are basically shooting league average. They're slightly better because they're getting easier shots against your defense. That's a problem. They give up a ton of corner threes as well, which, again, we've talked about it. Just get paint touches. Get into the paint. Force the defense to react, either to Giannis or Damian Lillard. More often than not, you got a guy in the corner sitting there, Torian Prince and others, waiting for that kick out for a corner three. So, these are all things that the Bucks do well and have done well since Giannis has been here. And it's areas that the Pelicans really struggle with. Health has been a big issue. Two-way players is a huge issue for the New Orleans Pelicans, too, with some of those names you mentioned. You get scoring, that's about it. And that's one of the issues that they've really had, not just this year, the past couple of years. But health is certainly the biggest issue that they're facing with that 11-32 record. We'll get some final thoughts on the Pelicans matchup and take a look to the rest of the games in the month of January, because it's a little bit of a primer for what's going to be a very challenging February, March, and first half of April. We'll do that and wrap things up after this.
This is Bucks Talk.
So how do you underpromise and still get the job? We believe in our hearts we're going to do great work for you. We're just really careful about making unrealistic promises. At Semper Fi, we refuse to set the bar higher than we can jump. But be assured, that's the goal. To do all we can to jump as high as possible to try to exceed your expectations. We're looking to break records. That's how you win over customers, get really great referrals, and build a great business. When you're making a decision to hire an exterior remodeling company, character, integrity, and the feeling that the people you're about to hire are truly eager to show you how good they are should stand at the top of your list. This is Brad Youngluth with Semper Fi Roofing and Exteriors, your local, veteran-owned and operated exterior remodeling company. For your new roof, siding, window and door installation, or masonry work, you can count on Semper Fi to keep you safe, warm, and dry.
We keep you safe, warm, and dry. Semper Fi.
Hey, WTMJ's John Mercure here, asking you to join me in October as my wife and I explore the magical kingdoms of Southeast Asia, from the villages of Vietnam and the temples of Cambodia to the friendly locals of Laos and the beachside resort in stunning, lively Thailand. I hope you'll join us for this unforgettable journey. Ancient and mysterious worlds of rural landscapes, bustling cities, and fascinating history in Vietnam. Explore the Chu Chi tunnels used by the Viet Cong. Experience a street food adventure through Hanoi and cherish the serenity of Hai Long Bay on a beautiful boat ride. Bangkok in Thailand, the beaches in Thailand, history, tradition, food. If you'd like more information on this great trip, send me an email. john.mercure@wtmj.com. john.mercure@wtmj.com. It's Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. I'm super jazzed about this trip. Send me an email. I send you the info. john.mercure, MERCURE, @wtmj.com.
For over a century, local radio has evolved with the needs of the community. From politics to pop culture, we keep you informed, bringing you the most relevant news, online, on air, and on the go. You have trusted us with your news, sports, weather, and entertainment. Trust us to keep moving with you. Text radio to 52886 and tell Congress local broadcasting is here to stay.
Welcome back to Bucks Talk.
I'm on top of the world.
All right, Wednesday nights, the Bucks return to the floor. So 2 days off, Wednesday night in New Orleans against the Pelicans. Going to be very interesting to see the injury report in that game and get a better sense of what it is that the Bucks are going to be going up against in that matchup. But as we mentioned, 5 of your final 6 games in the month of January are all on the road, and the level of competition starts to pick up for the Bucks as well. So at 24-17, said I wasn't sure how much of an impact this game would have in the numbers that we keep an eye on here. None. So offensively, the Bucks are still 12th best in the league at a 113.6 offensive rating, 110.9 defensive rating, is 8th best in the league, and they are 1 point per 100 possessions away from being 5th. So the teams in front of the Bucks, the Timberwolves, Grizzlies, and Celtics, those are some of the best defenses in the league and have been for the past few years. That's the company that the Bucks are in. That this is 41 games that we're looking at. This isn't just since the 2-8 start that they've done this and have played better defensively, and they're tied with the Sacramento Kings for being 10th in net rating. And that's usually your best barometer of success is, hey, if you're in the top 10 in all 3 of those areas, in offensive rating, defensive rating, and net rating, you're pretty good. And you're a team that we have to pay attention to. They're 10th in net rating, 12th in offensive rating, 8th in defensive rating. And if you want to cherry pick since the 2-8 start, so again, at this point, we're talking about 31 games. It's not a small sample size. They're 11th in offensive rating. They're just 1/10 of a point behind the Phoenix Suns for being in the top 10, less than a point away from the Houston Rockets for being 9th. They are 5th in defense, and their net rating is tied with the Denver Nuggets for 7th best. So since that 2-8 start, when basically everything that could go wrong did go wrong for the Bucks, they've been a top 10 team in all 3 categories. Now the big part is, look, we've said it passes the eye test. It looks good. All your metrics are lining up. They're the 2nd best three-point shooting team in the league. Giannis is leading the league in paint production. All these other things that have improved. The defense has been steady. Now you got to start to beat good teams. And you're not going to move the needle against the Celtics, the Cavs, and the New York Knicks, but you can do that against all of those teams that continue to hover around where the Bucks are in the standings. When you talk about, the teams like the Indiana Pacers, the Hawks, all of those teams, the Magic, they're 9-1 against that group of teams. Keep beating those teams and beat some Western Conference teams, and you'll be in a good spot.
Good week, Justin. Great week. If I could drop a perfect homestand, it would be what the Bucks did this week, 4-0. Fantastic.
Wednesday night, 7 o'clock tip from New Orleans. 6:30 is when our pregame coverage begins on WTMJ. And as always, be sure to stick around after the game for Bucks Talk. We'll see if the Bucks can make it 5 straight wins with that game in New Orleans. Brandon and I will talk to you then.
Now at Menards, save big money on everything for your next project. Transform everyday spaces into gathering places with custom craft countertops from Menards.